So this is an opinion piece, but it is very true to what is going on right now. So there is a dismantling of voting rights that is happening in plain sight. So this is a 4-minute read. It's short. It's by Levy Rickert. So this was Monday, May the 4th, 2026. So this, I believe, is a still frame of a voting rights march that was in history. And the opinion piece discusses voting rights. And it says voting rights in Indian country have never been guaranteed. They have been fought for and defended generation after generation, and that is why the U.S. Supreme Court's latest voting rights decision isn't just another legal development. It's a shift, one that will be felt in Native American communities across the country, and it is part of a broader pattern eroding the foundation of American democracy, including for Native voters. So let's be clear, the Voting Rights Act, it has not been erased on the books, but what remains is pretty hollow. For decades, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, it served as one of the most powerful tools available to Native nations and other communities of color to challenge discriminatory voting practices. So it recognized a simple truth: discrimination is not always loud or obvious. So as soon as I get right to that point, that's when the article vanishes. So that should tell you right there, they don't really want people to know about what they've just done. So I'm letting you know right now that this is an issue that is going on. So I might bounce off and on of this article, but I will try to read it to the best of my ability. So it says, for decades that Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act had served as one of the most powerful tools available to Native nations and communities of color to challenge discriminatory voting practices. So it recognized the simple truth that discrimination is not loud or obvious. It often hides in systems, district maps, polling access, bureaucratic hurdles that produce unequal outcomes even without explicit intent. That understanding is now under threat. So by raising the bar for proving discrimination, the court has shifted the burden in a way that ignores how inequality actually works. So it is no longer enough to show that a system disadvantages Native voters, but now there is a growing expectation to prove that intent, something rarely documented, rarely admitted, and often impossible to demonstrate. So this is not a minor adjustment. It is a fundamental change, and Indian country will feel it. Across the United States, Native communities already face unique barriers to voting. Many reservations are located in remote areas far from polling places, and reliable mail services is not a given. So standard street addresses are often non-existent. Language access remains an ongoing challenge for some tribal citizens. So these are not hypothetical obstacles. They are realities during elections. So there it goes again. So what I'll do is I'll just continue to jump back to the article, and I'll pan down and continue where I left off, or at least to the best of my ability. And it's a short read, but this just happened, so it is a hot button topic, and it has caused an uproar in a lot of communities that are paying attention and taking note of this. So it says that in the past, Section 2 allowed tribes and advocates to challenge the barriers by showing the real-world impact, so courts could look at the totality of circumstances and recognize when systems failed Native voters. Now those same cases may never succeed. So the consequences will be felt most immediately in redistricting So for years, Native communities have fought against maps and divide the reservations and dilute voting strength and prevent Native voters from electing candidates who understand their needs. So these battles were never easy, but they were winnable. Today, they are far more difficult. Map makers no longer need to worry as much about outcomes. So as long as they can avoid clear evidence of discriminatory intent, their maps may stand, even if those maps silence Native voices. This also is the case for communities of color, so I'm adding that in there. So this is how power shifts quietly. So the majority of the Supreme Court justice argued that these changes are about fairness. So the Constitution requires race-neutral policies and equal treatment under the law, but it is an appealing argument on the surface, but it ignores a deeper reality. Treating unequal conditions as if they are equal does not create fairness. It preserves inequality. So that is what was argued. I've been seeing it on different platforms. People who talk about trying to save democracy, people who discuss politics having to do with the voting rights or what's left of them. And that's what I've been seeing. So it's sad, but I feel like we're going backwards to a time to where we're going to have to fight just like the people that were here way before us. So, a colorblind approach to law might sound principled, but it becomes problematic when it disregards the real, very real, ongoing effects of history. So, Native communities did not start on equal footing, and they do not live on equal footing today. So the Voting Rights Act was never about giving anyone an advantage. It was about leveling the playing field that has never been leveled. So what we are witnessing now is not just a legal shift, it is a philosophical one. So it reflects a growing belief that the work of addressing discrimination is complete, or at least no longer requires strong federal oversight. So the Native people, that belief is disconnected from reality. So we know that the voting access can change from one election to the next. So we know that local decisions about polling locations, ID requirements, district lines can determine whether our communities are heard or ignored. And we know that without meaningful protections, those decisions are more likely to go unchallenged. So the Erosion of Voting Rights Act did not happen overnight. It has been a step-by-step process, with each decision weakening another piece. So for all of the people that think racism is gone and that we don't need these acts, I don't think that these decisions came because racism is gone. I believe these decisions came about because racism is so much more alive than ever before, and it has gotten worse, and it is getting worse, and it's going to get more worse. So we are going to see an unfortunate truth of some things that we thought our great-grandparents or our parents before us might have experienced. Some of us, or this generation after me, probably will experience some really rough times. And I believe we're starting. So the erosion of the Voting Rights Act did not happen overnight. It has been a step-by-step process, with each decisioning weakening another piece of the law's enforcement powers. So what remains is still important, but it is no longer as effective as it once was. So after Wednesday's Supreme Court ruling was announced, Representative Sharice Davids, a tribal citizen of the Ho-Chunk Nation, posted on X, formerly as Twitter, or known as Twitter, "Here's the reality of today's devastating Supreme Court's decision. It helps extreme politicians, or politicians that we've seen even today, rig elections and silence voters so they can protect their power." So within hours of the decision, southern states began the process of eliminating congressional districts that are predominantly black. So that should concern a lot of people right now. So basically they're starting to flip seats. But it's not in a good way. That's what it's sounding like. So I'm almost done with this article. It was very short, so I'm going to go all the way down. So I figured I would keep it kind of brief, but it makes it longer when they try to silence people's voices. So so basically, within hours of the decision, southern states began the process to eliminate congressional districts that are predominantly black. That should concern all Americans, not just those in the Indian country as well, because when voting rights are weakened for one group, they are weakened for everyone and all the groups that need them. So democracy does not erode in a dramatic moments. It fades through incremental changes that seem technical, even reasonable, until the cumulative effect becomes impossible to ignore. So we are nearing that point. The question is now whether the Voting Rights Act still exists at all. It does. The question is whether it still works as intended, to protect the voices of those who have historically been pushed to the margins. So for Native communities, the answer is becoming increasingly uncertain, and the uncertainty should be or should not be acceptable in a nation that calls itself a democracy. So that's basically the article. It's very short. It wasn't very long. So voting rights, what this means to those who are trying to figure out what this all means. So if you look at these signs, these were people marching for voting rights for people of color, for people of any group like Native people. We are seeing a shift where those rights are almost non-existent. And that's what just happened recently. And it would be harder to prove discriminatory practices. And so that's basically what they wanted to do, is strip the rights that people were trying to retain regarding voting. So like it said in the article, people might live in areas where they're not able to have access to get to voting polls. There could be information that they're not able to receive, or maybe they're not able to understand it. They may not be able to have the opportunities to vote for the candidates that they would want to elect, that have their interest at heart, or that can maybe do a lot of good in their communities. And that's all the groups. It's not just one group. So when one group's affected, all groups are affected. So that's what that decision meant. And I'm going to let this go, but it's sad because we are going backwards in time to a time that makes it so that all of the fighting, all of the marching, all of the protests that people did before us, it's going to have to happen all over again. But in a way where it's people that have mobilized, they're well read, they know what demands that they have, and they have them listed out, and they have a reason why they want the demands to be met. And it is someone that that can write these things down, list out why these demands are important and clearly describe, hey, this group is being discriminated because we're not able to have access to voting polls, we're not able to have access to information, or we're not having candidates that represent our interests and in our communities. And there's a lot of things that are being stripped away, a lot of rights, a lot of things that are being stripped away from people. So that's basically, a brief way of putting it. So I'm gonna let this go, but it's sad. A lot of people been commenting on it. A lot of people been seeing how this is very damaging to democracy in and of itself. And where is democracy in this? There is none.